Baie dankie daarvoor. Kom ons begin sommer vanmiddag se sessie. Welcome to everybody. I do not want to keep you long because I think it is much more important that you are going to study this afternoon. However, there's some important information that I need to communicate with you. Right. Give me a sec. Okay, can everybody see the screen?
Yes, ma'am.
Dankie.
Yes, ma'am.
Ja, okay, dankie. Right, the first very important thing is tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock you are writing class test 3. And all of us, you and me, definitely hopes, wishes and prays that you are going to do well in this test because this is now sort of the last one that we have in line. So, ek gaan nou 'n bietjie praat oor daai toets. Die toets tel uit 50 punte. The test will count out of 50 marks. Contrary to the previous test, there are only 2 questions of 25 marks each. Teenstrydig met die vorige vraestelle is daar net 2 vrae wat elk 25 punte tel. A very big emphasis on the last 2 study units that we've done. I've already told you that you can leave out the conceptual framework for this test only. But julle moet definitief baie erg konsentreer op eintlik die laaste 3. Die laaste 3 studie-eenhede, debiteure, krediteure en dan natuurlik ook voorraad. Daar is 'n 25 punt voorraad vraag in, dames en here. But dan natuurlik ook baie krediteure beginsels kan toets, want voorraad en krediteure loop hand in hand. So obviously, when I ask inventory, I also test creditors because those 2 are going hand in hand. Now the good news is I've spoken to our program leader and the head of our department, Professor van der Merwe, on Monday. And I said to him, well, he's very much aware of your brilliant marks up till now. And I have asked whether we can give you an additional 15 minutes. So ek het gevra of julle 15 minute extra kan kry, pasella kan kry, wat julle nie eintlik moes gekry het nie vir die volgende toets. And the guys, the reason... It's a pleasure. But the reason for this 15 minutes, guys, is really to help you so that you can perform better. Because I think I've seen that because that's the reasons why you do not submit on Ifundi in time because you are using your technical time in order to write. And that is why you don't get everything done in time. So hierdie is 'n vergunning wat eenmalig gemaak gaan word. This is only something that will happen once. It's not going to happen again this year. Where you receive then, in effect, instead of 1.8 minutes a mark, you will receive 2.1 minute a mark. So in plaas van 1.8 minute 'n punt, gaan jy vir hierdie toets en net vir hierdie toets nie weer ooit weer hierdie jaar of ooit weer in hierdie jou loopbaan by die PUC gaan jy weer 2.1 minute kry nie. Guys, I'm the moderator for WITS, their first year students, and I received the paper today. And I can tell you one thing, they only have 1.5 mark per, 1.5 minutes per mark. You guys have normally 1.8 minutes and now in this test 2.1 minutes. So julle is besonder bevoorreg hierso by ons om 1.8 minute per punt te kry. So ver ek weet, 80 of 85% van al die ander universiteite gee slegs 1.5 minute per punt. So guys, that means that you must really do something about the time you take to answer a question. Now, I think time is a problem, but time is definitely not half of your problem. Your biggest problem is that you cannot read. So please exercise your reading skills in tomorrow's paper. Lees elke vraag behoorlik deur. Before you pick up your pen to start writing, make 100% sure you're well aware of the contents of the full question. Not only that you wanted to read, only that you don't scan over anything. You have to read it word by word and think about the wider implications of anything that you are reading. So lees asseblief môre jou vraestel behoorlik. So julle gaan 15 minute ekstra kry, so in effek wat julle nou het, julle het gewoonlik 105 minute, julle gaan na môre se toets 125 minute hê. You still have 20 minutes time for upload and technical stuff, but your writing time is now going to be 105 minutes. Okay. Nou het ons ook 'n ander vergunning vir julle gemaak en daar moet julle professor van der Merwe ook baie dankie sê. Guys, Prof van der Merwe came with a suggestion because your participation marks is going, even if you perform well in tomorrow's test, your participation mark is still under heavy pressure. And what he has suggested, and we're going to do that now, is next Monday, the 31st of May. I'm going to open up a multi-choice question paper for you guys. So ek gaan volgende maandag 'n multi-keuse vraestelletjie vir julle opstel en oopmaak. Ek dink daar gaan so 15 vrae wees. I think there's going to be about 15 questions. Now, how that will work is, look, you're writing 3 tests. One is a fall-away test, so 2 tests are supposed to count. Now, this test that you're going to write, this multi-choice test you're going to write on Monday, will replace 50% of your weakest test that's going to count. So if you had 40%, 50%, and 60% for the 3 tests, the 40% was going to fall away. The second worst one is 50%, and then if you perform better in this multi-choice question test on Monday, that will replace, or that will count 50% of the worst test. So the worst test will still count 50%, except now the fall-away test, that's going to be out of the way completely. So the remaining 2 tests, the worst one of them, will then be replaced 50% of the mark by this multi-choice question that you're going to write on Monday. So ek dink dit is 'n wonderlike tegemoetkoming wat van hulle kant af kom om julle te help. Daar's hier, ek moet vir julle een ding sê. Dis nie net julle wat sukkel nie. Die eerstejaars van al die universiteite sukkel geweldig hierdie jaar. So the first year students on all the universities battle extremely this year. It is a huge battle in all the varsities. Now, I see Wits is a year course. So they still have time to make up in the second semester because it is all counting towards 1 mark. Where we have semester courses and you are supposed to write it off this semester and then we can continue next semester. Because next semester is a normal semester. Volgende semester is 'n normale semester met so 'n normale tyd. Hy's nie weer alles ingekrimp in 'n klein dingetjie nie. I think you will do much better as the year then goes along. So I think each and every test that you're going to write, providing that you actually study very hard for that test, it will go slightly better and better and better with you until towards the end of the year. So I think our first port of call is just to get 50% for you on the table so that we can at least get you into the second semester. And then in the second semester, we can keep on building on the first semester so that we can get you to some kind of a decent mark by the end of the year. So, do you all understand this 50% story? Verstaan julle die 50% story? That test will be open for the whole of Monday. I'm not going to put a time limit in the sense that you can only write it between 8 and 10 or 10 and 12 or whatever. And the main reason for that is that our face-to-face classes will start on Monday. I just want to show you here. Use our face-to-face classes. Now, guys, I will communicate who's going to be in what class, most probably either tomorrow or the day thereafter. But you will see that die Afrikaanse groep, julle ouens het klas 12:30 tot 2:15 maandagmiddag en dan het jy van 2:15 tot 2:30. Gaan ons net na 'n ander lokaal toe beweeg en daar sien jy optional, maar ek dink dis stupid as jy nie altyd bywoon nie, want dit is net tot jou voordeel. So ons het basies van 12:30 af die middag tot 4:30 die middag het ons klas. Ons het dan 'n 2 lokale klas, so ons gaan daar 'n bietjie asem skep tussenin. Guys, I will give you obviously a little bit of breaks in between just to go to the bathroom or whatever. But I never give a break longer than 5 minutes because it takes too long to get everything going again. And then students actually take then advantage of that to their own detriment. Goed, so dan op 'n Dinsdag sal julle sien, die Afrikaanse ouens begin ons 8:00 die oggend, maar daar bly ons in een lokaal, ons bly in hierdie lokaal en ons gaan oor dan tot 12:00 die oggend, wat dan die amptelike sessie is wat eers 9:15 begin. So die Afrikaanse ouens is Maandag en Dinsdag. Dit sal dieselfde sessie wees wat Maandag en Dinsdag aangebied word, want ons het 'n kapasiteitsprobleem. So ons kan net 'n bepaalde aantal studente in 'n week akkommodeer. So daaroor is Maandag en Dinsdag se sessie dan presies dieselfde sessie, so jy gaan nie albei bywoon nie. Jy gaan of Maandag bywoon of Dinsdag bywoon. Vir die ouens wat dit nie kan bywoon nie, gaan daar 'n live streaming gedoen word. Ek het nog geen idee hoe nie, hulle gaan my glo Vrydag wys, maar daar gaan live streaming gedoen word van die sessie. Met ander woorde, as jy nie self in die klas kan sit nie, dan gaan jy dit klas daarom kan volg. Maar jy weet, daar is hierdie sommige klasse volg by die huis, nee, is 'n grootste strooi onder die son, want jy sit daar, so as jy luister, sit jy iets anders te doen, terwyl ek wara, en jy doen jou eie ding. So dit werk nie rarig nie, jy behoort te weet. Okay, for the English group. Now, your sessions is on a Wednesday and on a Friday. On a Wednesday morning, we're also starting 8 o'clock. There's the venue, E3G20. And please make sure that you know where the venues are before the session, so that you don't pitch up here 8 o'clock and then you're battling to find the venue until 9 o'clock. You're wasting my time and your time. And let me tell you one thing, once I've started with a session, I close the doors. And you will not be allowed to enter that room once I've started. There is nothing so disruptive like students coming in late into your class. So I will not stand for that and I will not take that. So you're either here when I start and I will start functionally at 8 o'clock if the session starts at 8 o'clock. Not 8:15, not 8:30, 8 o'clock. Good. If I want to change the time schedule, I will let you know beforehand, but for the first classes at least, it will start at 8 o'clock. Good. So then the second optional session, we will stay in that venue, E3G20, for the optional session, but the optional session, as far as I'm concerned, is just if you have very serious stuff that you have to do in that session, then obviously you have to do that. Otherwise, I would expect to see most of you in the optional class as well. Now that same session is repeated on a Wednesday from 10:15, and that session will then end at 2:15. The first one is the optional one, the second one is the compulsory one. All right, so at 2:15 on a Friday afternoon we will be done, so there's more than enough time to enjoy your Friday afternoon. Not that you are at leisure to do such things as enjoying yourselves, you are much too close to the exam. So obviously this will be now repeated in the week thereafter. So again, you must either attend the Wednesday session or the Friday session. We will tell you who's going to attend what tomorrow or the day thereafter. I'm waiting on Prof. van der Merwe once more. He has worked out all the logistics. So you are not going to attend both Wednesdays and Fridays. It will be Wednesdays or Fridays. And we will tell you whether it's going to be the Wednesday or the Friday that we expect you. And again, it's all about capacity. we want to see at least all of you once a week. And we cannot do that by seeing the same people twice a week. Also, if I look at the communication that was sent out over the weekend about the teaching and learning in the second semester, I think maybe we stand a good chance of continuing this kind of contact sessions in the second semester, hopefully from the start. But let's don't get excited about that right now. We will wait for them to give us the answer, but hopefully this will continue. Okay, just on that. So that is the face-to-face sessions. What must you bring along to the face-to-face sessions? You must pitch up here with sitting there with nothing in front of you. Listen to me now. You see, I'm already now again, yeah, up in arms. You pitch up in that class with a pen, with paper, your calculator, and your laptop. As jy na hierdie kontaksessies toe kom, dan kom jy nie daar die hande aangesit nie. Die soldaat gaan nie sonder 'n geweer na die oorlogsfront toe nie. Jy moet sorg dat jy pen het, jy moet sorg dat jy papier het, jy het jou sakrekenaar nodig en jy het 'n skootrekenaar nodig. Guys, I'm not going to talk all the time in these contact sessions. We are going to work in the contact sessions. So ons gaan lekker hard werk, almal vir ons, ek en jy, in hierdie kontaksessies. So daaroor het jy nodig om al hierdie goed saam met jou te bring na daardie kontaksessie toe. Is daar enige vrae tot nou toe oor die kontaksessies of oor die toets? Are there any questions about the test or the contact sessions at this stage? Okay, back goed. So let's continue, and I just quickly want to touch base on creditors and inventory because that is more or less the most important part of tomorrow's test. Okay, creditors. Now, the first thing that you should know is how do I disclose the trade and other payables note to the statement of financial position, and how do I disclose trade and other payables as a whole in the statement of financial position. So jy moet weet hoe word handels en ander krediteure in die staat van finansiële posisie geopenbaar. And you may correct and do, because remember what I've told you before. I said in the first two tests, we ask you a lot of journal entries. And there's a purpose for that because we wanted to see whether you know what you're doing, and then we all then actually came to the conclusion you don't know what you're doing. But the end of the story is that we are now definitely going to test from now on until the end of the year, at least in one question that you're going to get disclosure. So ten minste in een vraag wat jy van nou af tot die einde van die jaar in 'n vraestel gaan kry, gaan oor openbaarmaking. Ons het dit nog nie gevra nie, so natuurlik gaan ons dit hierdie keer vra. You do not disclose things the way that you would like to disclose it. You have to disclose it according to the way it needs to be disclosed according to IFRS. So IFRS sê vir jou, hoe moet jy dit openbaar maak? En jy kan nie jou eie kop volg nie. Jy moet daardie voorwaardes moet jy nakom. So trade and other payables, that note will start with trade creditors, and then you're going to deduct from trade creditors your allowance for settlement discounts. So het gaan begin met jou handelskrediteure syfer, en dan gaan jy daarvan aftrek jou toelaag vir vereffeningskorting wat op handelskrediteure gebaseer is. En dan kry ek my netto handelskrediteure. So the difference between the two is my net trade creditors. Guys, now the same principles apply to this allowance for settlement discount that applies to the allowance for settlement discount for debtors. When does an allowance for settlement discount expires? Wanneer verval 'n toelaag vir vereffeningskorting? Number one, when payment takes place, then I have to take it out of my books because then it's no longer valid. So wanneer betaling plaasvind, is dit nie meer geldig nie, uit my boeke uit verwyder word. As betaling nie plaasgevind het nie, maar die vereffeningstydperk is verstreke, dan moet ek hom ook uit my boeke uithaal. So if payment didn't take place, but the settlement discount period has expired, then I have to remove that allowance amount out of my books as well. Now with creditors, what is the account that goes hand in hand with the allowance for settlement discount? In a perpetual inventory system, it's inventory. In a periodic inventory system, it is purchases. Die rekening wat hand in hand gaan met die toelaag of effeningskorting by krediteure is by deurlopende voorraadstelsel voorraad en by periodieke voorraadstelsel aankope. So when you remove it out of the books, that is where you're going to take it to, either purchases or inventory. So as jy hom uit jou boeke uitverwyder, gaan hy of voorraad toe of hy gaan aankope toe. Dit is nou wanneer hierdie toelaag verval het. So that is when this allowance has expired. Obviously, when payment takes place, you take it out of your books normally and it forms part of that entry that happens in my cash book payments journal. So as die betaling plaasgevind het, dan is dit 'n normale manier om my toelaag uit my boeke uit te haal en daardie inskrywing word dan in my kontant betalingsjoernaal gedoen. Ek sien baie van julle weet nog steeds nie werk hulpjoernale en die kolomme van hulpjoernale nie, so ek kan jou nie help as jy dit nou nog nie weet nie en ek gaan jou weer 'n keer uitvang. So if you still don't know how the columns of your sub-journals, your sub-journals are working, you still don't know your subsidiary journals are working, you don't know how that cross-casting and downcasting of the columns are working, then I cannot help you and I will catch you out once more. Then also part of your note will be your other creditors. Now, under other creditors are things like accrued expenses, income received in advance, VAT control if it has a credit balance, and then all your salary-related creditors. Now, before we get there, let's just take one step back. Accrued expenses, will that be a VAT inclusive or a VAT exclusive amount? Guys, if I received or if I did receive an invoice, it will always be a VAT inclusive amount. Opgelope uitgawes, wanneer ek 'n faktuur ontvang het vir daardie uitgawe wat betaal moet word, sal hy altyd BTW insluit. So opgelope uitgawes sluit BTW in. But what about income received in advance? What are the questions that the receiver of revenue asks you? He says, number one, he says, is there an invoice? If the answer is yes, he says, what's your problem? Then you handle the VAT on the invoice, either as VAT input or output, depending whether it's an income or expense item. So the first question is there an invoice? If there's an invoice, then the VAT on the invoice is either claimed or paid over. If there's not an invoice, the next question that he asks is, did cash flow take place? If the answer is yes, then you can claim the VAT if it was an expense, an amount that you've paid, or you have to pay over the VAT if it is an amount that you have received in your bank account. So if cash flow took place, then there is VAT that comes into play. Therefore, if you look at income received in advance, what has happened? I have received the money as yet, but I haven't done the work as yet. So therefore, I park that money into this liability account, income received in advance. Because I've already received the money, I had to pay over the VAT. So income received in advance will never have that included. Inkomste vooruit ontvang. Wat is die vraag by die ontvanger van inkomste vra? Hy sê, was daar 'n belastingfaktuur? As daar 'n belastingfaktuur was, is die antwoord maklik. Hy sê vir jou man, jy eis die belasting op die belastingfaktuur as dit 'n uitgawe was, of jy betaal die belasting op die belastingfaktuur oor na my toe as dit 'n inkomste was. As die antwoord is nee, daar was nie 'n belastingfaktuur, dan sê ek, ek gee jou nog 'n kans. Ek vra jou tweede vraag. Hy sê my tweede vraag wat ek jou vra is, hy sê het kontantvloei plaasgevind? As die antwoord ja is, dan sê was jy geld ontvang het, 'n gedeelte van 15% wat ingesluit is in daai bedrag wat jy ontvang het, is myne, betaal dit oor as BTW uitset. As jy geld uitgegee het of betaal het, dan sê man 15% van daai bedrag wat jy betaal het, jy kan dit maar gaan eis as BTW inset. So waar kontantvloei dan plaasgevind het, dan word daar met BTW gehandel. So inkomste vooruit ontvang, beteken mos ek het al klaar die geld ontvang, maar ek het nog nie die diens gelewer nie, daaroor gaan parkeer ek dit in 'n laste rekening. Nou daai inkomste vooruit ontvang, omdat kontantvloei al reeds plaasgevind het, beteken dan met ander woorde, ek het klaar die BTW oorbetaal. So inkomste vooruit ontvang sal nooit BTW insluit nie. Ek hoop julle het 'n groot nota daarvan gemaak. VAT control and BTW controle, well, that speaks for itself. That's the amount that we owe the receiver of revenue for VAT. Bedrag wat ons ontvanger skuld vir BTW. Now let's talk about salary-related creditors, and now ignore salaries for tomorrow, and you will see what happens to you. What do we show as salary-related creditors? Number one, if I haven't paid my employees as yet at month's end, the net amount that I owe them will be a salary creditor. As ek nog nie my werknemers op maandeinde betaal het nie, dan gaan die netto salaris wat ek hulle skuld as 'n salariskrediteur getoon word onder ander krediteure. Guys, what is net salaries? Net salaries, and listen carefully, equals gross salary less deductions. And that deductions is the employee's amounts that I can deduct from his salary. So it is 100% his money that I'm spending now on his behalf. I pay his pay as you earn over to receive of revenue. I pay his contribution to the pension fund over to the pension fund. So that is what we mean by by deductions. That are all the amounts that we deduct from his salaries, his salary that needs to be paid over to a third party. Now, all the contributions made by the employer on behalf of his employee, like for instance, the employer also pays towards the employee's pension fund. So he also contributes towards his pension fund. The employer has to, according to law, also have to pay 1% of his salary, his gross salary, to the UIF. Now, that expenses that comes out of the pocket of the entity of the company. So the company's contribution to the employer's whatever fund, that must be then recognized as an expense, number one, in the books of the entity. And then obviously I'm going to raise a creditor because I still owe that third party the money. So typically things like pension fund creditor will include the deduction made from the employee's salary plus the contribution made by the employer, and the same thing applies to UIF. Spraak gou oor salarisverwante krediteure. As ek nou klaar gesê, as ek my eie werknemers nog nie op jou maandeinde betaal het nie, dan moet die netto salaris wat ek aan hulle moes betaal het as 'n krediteur getoon word. Wat is netto salaris? Dit is bruto salaris minus al die aftrekkings wat van 'n werknemer se salaris gemaak is. Dus al die aftrekkings afgetrek is, dan kry ek 'n netto bedrag, en daai netto bedrag, met ander woorde na aftrekkings, bruto salaris min aftrekkings. Dit is wat ek in sy bankrekening moet inbetaal, dis wat ek dan aan hom skuld. Nou, al hierdie aftrekkings wat ek maak van sy salaris, LBS, pensioenfonds, werkloosheidsversekering, al daai aftrekkings, dis sy geld wat ek vat, maar ek moet dit gaan oorbetaal aan die derde party, soos die pensioenfonds, die werkloosheidsversekeringsfonds ensovoorts. So met ander woorde, as deel van my salarisverwante krediteure, gaan die bedrag wees wat ek afgetrek het van hom wat nog oorbetaal moet word. Die werkgewer se bydraes, met ander woorde, die werkgewer kan ook bydra tot die werknemer se pensioenfonds. Die werkgewer moet volgens wet bydra tot die werkloosheidsversekeringsfonds van die werknemer. So met ander woorde, daai bydraes wat uit die gatsak uitkom van die werkgewer, hy betaal daarvoor, moet as 'n uitgawe erken word in sy boeke, dis die debiet, en die krediet daarvan gaan dan as 'n krediteur getoon word. So krediteur is soos 'n pensioenfonds of soos 'n werkloosheidsversekeringsfonds, gaan altyd die bydra wees van wat afgetrek is van die werknemer se salaris plus die bydra wat gedoen is deur die werkgewer. En daai totale bedrag moet dan getoon word as 'n krediteur. Ook baie belangrik.
Mevrou, kan ek gou 'n vraag vra? Ekskuus. Ek wil net weet by die handelskrediteure, nê, kan die korttermyn gedeelte van 'n lening, kan dit hier ook kom of kan dit net as 'n aparte lyn item onder bedryfslaste kom?
Ja. Daar is 'n korttermynlenings of korttermyn gedeelte van 'n langtermynlening, is 'n aparte lyn item, hy word apart onder bedryfslaste geopenbaar en jy skryf nog nie daaroor nie. Guys, short-term portion of a long-term loan, you do not write about that as yet, but that is a separate line item that will appear under current liabilities. It does not form part of the trade and other creditors note. Terug te kom
Dis
by
mevrou, kan ek
Wag net 'n bietjie dat ek net klaar maak hier, dan kan julle alles vra. Salarisverwante krediteure met ander woorde gaan dan wees die netto salaris wat betaalbaar is aan die werknemers plus al hierdie derde party betalings wat gedoen moet word soos die LBS wat aan SARS gedoen moet word en die pensioenfonds ensovoorts en elke een van hulle moet apart getoon word in my nota vir handels en ander krediteure. Okay, spin hom nou. Wat vra julle? Kom nou hulle doodstil.
Mevrou,
Yes.
kies. Okay, dit was net omdat mevrou het in een van die video's toe ons krediteure gedoen het mevrou gesê jy kan dit die lopende gedeelte van 'n lening van 'n langtermynlening kan jy onder jou handels en ander betaalbare sit.
Ja,
Mevrou het dit in een van die video's so verduidelik.
Word by party plekke aanvaar. Ek sê vir jou nou jy moet dit nie doen nie.
Okay, dankie mevrou.
Right. Alright.
Mevrou, ek wil ook net vra,
Ja.
so in ons handels en ander betaalbare nota, as ons nou iets kry van salarisse, ons sit ons dan die netto salaris in as krediteure vir daar as ek maar sit ons die bydraes en die aftrekkings ook in.
Net as dit nog verskuldig is aan die party aan wie dit betaal moet word. So dit gaan daaroor gaan kyk 'n bietjie mooi hoe lyk my joernaalindskrywing. Wat gaan na my uitgawerekening toe vir salarisse? Die bruto salaris. Dis baie belangrik. Guys in English, listen carefully. What do I post to my income statement as salary expense? My gross salary. That goes to my income statement as my expense item. What will go to this note, wat na hierdie nota toe gaan, is die bedrag wat ek afgetrek het, maar dit gaan nie oor die bedrag wat ek afgetrek het nie, dit gaan daaroor dat daardie bedrag wat ek afgetrek het, moet ek gaan oorbetaal aan iemand anders. Ek het jou geld gevat, wat jy verdien het. Ek moet dit nou net namens jou gaan oorbetaal. So, that deductions that I have to pay over to third parties, it is your money that I took, that I have to pay over to somebody else. And that is why there's a creditor. I've already deducted, you have financed that if it was a deduction made from your salary. You have financed that with your salary. I just perform a service on your behalf to pay it over to the third party. And then it's not only your deduction or the amount that you have funded, but it's also the amount that I have funded out of my back pocket that I also have to pay over to the third party. So if the third party is the same party, i.e. like the pension fund or the UIF, I will add your amount that I have to pay over to the UIF fund, as well as my amount that I have to pay over to the UIF fund in order to derive at the total amount that is payable to the fund. So die Afrikaanse is my gevolg. Dit gaan, bruto salaris is my uitgawe in my inkomste staat. Hierdie bedrag wat ek van jou salaris afgetrek het, moet ek namens jou gaan oorbetaal aan daardie derde party. So, dis jou geld wat ek gevat het, maar ek moet daai geld wat ek van jou gevat het, aan 'n derde party gaan gee. En as ek dit nog nie gedoen het nie, dan is dit vir my 'n verpligting, dis hoekom ek die las moet gaan skep. So die geld wat ek afgetrek het by jou as 'n aftrekking, plus hierdie wat ek self bygedra het as 'n onderneming, daardie twee bymekaar getel, as dit aan dieselfde derde party oorbetaal moet word, soos jou bydrae en my bydrae moet saam aan die pensioenfonds oorbetaal word. Dan het ek net een krediteur, want dit is dieselfde ou, dis die pensioenfonds. Jou bydrae en my bydrae tot die werkloosheidsversekeringsfonds, daar's net een ou wat betaal moet word, is die werkloosheidsversekeringskommissaris. So ek vat dan daai twee bedrae saam en dit maak my krediteur se bedrag uit. Okay, is daar nog vrae hier rondom?
Sorry, ma'am.
Yes.
Ma'am, with the UIF, so there's your contribution and deduction. So within the notes, are we going to record one as UIF and then one as contribution? Like, because the business or the entity also has to pay the other part, or can we just put them into one account?
One account, one line item. Okay.
All right, thank you much, ma'am.
So you will have one UIF, although it is your part and the entity's part, but there's only one creditor on the other side, and that's the UIF commissioner. So that's why you add the two amounts together and only show one amount in this creditors and other creditors note. Okay.
Thank you, ma'am.
Sorry, ma'am.
Yes.
With regards to the UIF, I understand that it's 1%, but do we have to recognize it at the maximum cutoff value if it's above that set?
No, I've never asked that for you, so no. The answer, you should know that because that is important information to know when you go out there in the real world. You should know that there is a cutoff, but I'm not going to test the cutoff if that is the question. Okay.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
Okay.
Sorry, ma'am, I just want to make sure I understand this correctly. So under salary-related creditors, we're going to have one line item, which is the net salary of the employees that we owe the money to. And then if we haven't paid contributions such as UIF, then we're going to create a separate line item for each of them.
100%. So you will have a line item. If I haven't paid my employees as yet, you'll have a line item called creditors for salaries, and that will equal the net salary payable to my employees. Then you will have a line item UIF commissioner. That will be his contribution and my contribution that still needs to be paid over to the commissioner. You will have a line item SARS, pay as you earn. En dan sê jy dit aparte lyn item vir elke belasting wat jy moet betaal. So jy gaan 'n aparte lyn item hê vir SAID, dubbelpunt LBS, die bedrag wat jy moet oorbetaal aan hom. Ek moet hierdie klank afsit. En dan en dan gaan jy 'n aparte lyn item hê vir pensioenfonds. So you will have a separate line then for the total pension fund amount that you owe to the fund. So that again will be the contribution made by the employee as well as the contribution made by the employer. Okay. Julle met hom. Clear as mud. Okay, then I want to move along to inventory. Now, a lot of the principles that apply to creditors applies obviously to inventory because you've known what do we do when we debit inventory? When we debit inventory, we are working with a VAT exclusive amount, and if there's an allowance for settlement discount, we are going to deduct that from the inventory value, or if we do not use allowance accounts, but we make use of a discount at a later stage, a settlement discount, then whenever we receive a settlement discount, you know that that discount must also reduce the value of that inventory item that I've purchased. So, voorraad, dames en here, is krediteure se ander been. So as jy krediteure doen, dan kan jy voorraad ook doen. Jy weet wat jy na die kosprys van 'n voorraadrekening toeneem, of die aankoopberekening vir that matter. Jy neem nou om die BTW uitgesluite bedrag van die faktuur. As dit by beleid is om van toelaagrekeninge gebruik te maak, dan weet jy ook, as die toelaagrekening word gepos na die toelaagrekening toe, ek maak ons daai twee beentjies, né? Bepaal die faktuurbedrag, haal die BTW uit, maak die twee beentjies. Die een beentjie, kom ons sê, daar's 'n 3% vereffeningskorting, 97% van die BTW uitgesluite bedrag gaan na voorraad toe. 3% gaan na die toelaagrekening toe. So wat vat ek na voorraad toe? Die bedrag nadat die vereffeningskorting toelaag alreeds afgetrek is. Guys, if you think about inventory, what do we do? We take the invoice amount. First step. Second step, take out the VAT. Third step, break it down into the two legs. Let's assume we can utilize a 3% settlement discount, and we expect that we're going to make use of it. 97% of the VAT exclusive amount will be posted to my inventory account, and 3% will be posted to my allowance for settlement discount account. So in effect, if you now just think about the inventory leg, what is in the inventory leg? Only 97% of the VAT exclusive amount. So by implication, what did I do? I've deducted the settlement discount. So by implicasie het ek alreeds die vereffeningskorting afgetrek. If it was not my expectation to make use of the settlement discount, then obviously I would have taken the full VAT exclusive amount to the inventory account when the purchase transaction took place. But then let's say I do settle that account in time and I do receive a settlement discount when payment takes place. Then when I receive that settlement discount, you know that the VAT exclusive portion of that settlement discount actually received must be posted again to my inventory so that my inventory is then after the settlement discount has been deducted. So waar ek voorraad item aangekoop het, ek het nooit gedink ek gaan van die vereffeningskorting gebruik maak nie, so ek het nooit by die aankoopstransaksie daarvoor voorsiening gemaak nie. So wat het ek dan in my voorraad toe geneem? Die BTW uitgesluite faktuurbedrag. Toe gaan ek en toe betaal ek hierdie voorraad item wel in tyd en ek maak toe van daardie vereffeningskorting gebruik. Nou by die betaalslag, toe ek toe van daai vereffeningskorting gebruik gemaak het, moet ek nou my voorraad ook gaan regmaak met die BTW uitgesluite gedeelte van daardie vereffeningskorting. So voorraad gaan altyd getoon word nadat alle kortings waarop iemand geregtig is, daarvan afgetrek is. So inventory is always shown at the amount, that exclusive amount, after all settlement and all discounts for that matter, but in the invoice amount, the trade discount has already been deducted. So inventory is after all discounts that this entity was entitled on was actually deducted from the value of that inventory item. So dis 'n belangrike, jy moet net die twee aan mekaar raak asseblief. Please guys, think in total. Inventory and creditors, you can't think in isolation. It is one and the same thing. You must think about those two study units as a whole. Nou die eerste belangrike ding wat julle moet weet, gaan oor voorraadwaardasies. En daar gaan dit oor my waardasiemetodes. Eerste uit, geweegde, gemiddelde of spesifieke identifikasiemetode. Afhangende van die metode wat ek vir jou gee om te gebruik, moet jy daardie metode toepas om by eindvoorraad uit te kom en om koste van verkope mee te bereken. Guys, so if we talk about inventory valuation methods, first in, first out, weighted average cost and specific identification method, you must be able to use in your question either one of those three methods that I gave you in order to derive at what? At closing inventory and at cost of sales. Now, what is of extreme importance is that you identify before you start making a lot of calculations whether it's a perpetual inventory system or a periodic inventory system. Voor jy begin somme maak, bepaal eers sit ek met 'n deurlopende voorraadstelsel of 'n periodieke voorraadstelsel. Now, very important, and make a note once more. Perpetual inventory system is like test 2, where I told you specifically, your journal entries must be in date order. Sequentially means it must be in date order. So dan sê jy dat die lopende voorraadstelsel is soos in toets 2, waar ek jou baie spesifiek gesê het, jou joernaalinskrywings moet in datum volgorde plaasvind, want dit het 'n impak op jou inskrywings. So perpetual means I have to follow the dates. So if I give you all the purchase transactions together and all the sales transactions together, you must make sure that you sort these whole lot, purchases and sales, in date order when you're actually going to determine the value of cost of sales and closing inventory. So as ek vir jou al die aankoopstransaksies saamgee in 'n aparte punt en ek gee vir jou 'n ander punt verkoopstransaksies, met datums natuurlik in elk, dan moet jy hierdie goed so gaan shuffle, dat jy daardie aankope en verkope transaksies in datumvolgorde doen, want dit het 'n impak op jou antwoord as jy by eindvoorraad of koste van verkope wil uitkom. Nou, ek gaan nou nie hierso met, ek dink ek het genoeg gepraat oor deurlopend en periodiek in die videos. I've spoken enough about perpetual and periodic in the videos, so you should have watched the videos and make sure that you know that your calculations are different, whether you're using a perpetual inventory system or a periodic inventory system. So dan sê jy jou berekeninge lyk anderster as ek deurlopend of periodiek gebruik, so jy moet baie seker gaan maak dat jy weet waar lê die verskille en dat jy dit kan identifiseer en dat jy dit kan toepas. Now listen carefully and make a huge big red note. Maak 'n groot rooi nota. If you see in a question units, now that unit can be kilograms, it can be meters, it can be milligrams, it can be whatever, or just units. Then you must know that you're going to do your answer in a table format, or another word for it, And very important, take note. Another word for it is I am going to do my answer in the stock card way or method. And that means I'm going to have units, I'm going to have total value, and I'm going to have unit prices. Luister nou mooi vir die Antie. Waar jy in 'n vraag enigsins eenhede sien. Nou daai eenhede kan kilogramme wees, dit kan meters wees, dit kan net eenhede wees. As jy daai eenheid dingetjie sien, né, kilogram se eenheid. Eenhede is 'n eenheid. Liters is 'n eenheid. As jy dit sien, dan onmiddellik weet jy gaan jou antwoord in 'n tabelformaat moet doen. En daardie tabelformaat se mooi naam wat hulle vra in vrae is die voorraadkaartmetode. Die voorraadkaartmetode. Het julle dit neergeskryf? Guys, did you put it down? Stock card equals table format. Voorraadkaart is gelyk aan tabelformaat. En wat is die tabelformaat? Ek het eenhede, ek het totale waarde en ek het prys per eenheid. En jy doen al jou berekening in daardie tabelformaat of voorraadkaartformaat. So you do all your calculations in the table format or the stock card method format. Okay. Gaan kyk vir my daarso na Benedict's. Ek sê nie jou vraag gaan Benedict's wees of lyk soos Benedict's nie, dames en here, maar dis 'n goeie voorbeeld van wat ek nou vir jou gesê het. So Benedict's is a good example of what I try to explain to you now. That is the outlay of, and that is, by the way, a good question, but that is the outlay that you have to prepare your answer in. Luister nou ook baie mooi vir die Antie. Hierdie toets wat jy môre skryf, het ongelooflik baie berekeninge in. Wat jy nie doen nie, is om al jou berekeninge agter in jou vraestel in te sit. Dames en here, as jy berekeninge doen vir vraag 1, dan sit jy vraag 1 se berekeninge by vraag 1. Jy sit vraag 2 se berekeninge by vraag 2 en vraag 3 se berekeninge by vraag 3. Ek wil nie 50 bladsye blaai tot heel onder en dan sien gats jy het berekeninge gedoen vir vraag 1. Listen to me carefully, very carefully, because I am going to deduct marks if you don't listen to me. This paper that you're going to write tomorrow has a lot, but a lot of calculations in. Please, in heaven's name, show your calculations, otherwise you're going to fail again. When you do calculations in a question, when you do question 1, you attach the calculations for question 1 at the end of question 1, not at the end of the paper. Then you do question 2 with its calculations, then question 3 with its calculations. I don't want a page to 50 pages and then at the end I say, oh my dear, here's calculations for question 1 that I haven't marked as yet. It's not on. Calculations go with the question that you're busy with. So if you're doing question 1's calculations, it goes with question 1 and 2 and 3. Not all of them together. Also, when you do calculations, please do cross-referencing so that I can know where to look for your answer. So if you, for instance, going to work out cost of sales, then you tell me cost of sales, you're going to say it's calc 1. And here at your calculations, calc 1. And then you do the calculation. I don't want to go and look for your figures. I don't want to say, what is this stuff? Maybe it's cost of sales, maybe it's inventory, maybe it's somewhere net rubbish. So, wanneer jy die berekeninge doen, en jy dit by die regte vraag sit, dan kruisverwys jy na daardie berekening wat jy doen. So as jy koste van verkope uitwerk, dan sê koste van verkope calc 1. Hieronder sê vir my calc 1 en jy werk vir my koste van verkope uit. Ek wil nie na jou syfertjies in jou berekeninge gaan kyk en wonder waarmee jy besig nie. Ek gaan nie wonder wat se rubbish staan nou hierso nie. As jy nie vir my hoor ek sê calc 1 dat ek kan sien jy's besig met koste van verkope nie, dan sal ek dit ook nie merk nie. Want dames en here, ek met 300 vraestelle merk, ek het nie die tyd om rond te krap en my calculator in elke vraestel te vat en te probeer uitfigure wat het jy aangevang nie. So please, for tomorrow's test, proper cross-referencing is of vital importance. Behoorlike kruisverwysing is van die uiterste belang en dit is of the utmost importance that you show me all your calculations. Dit is van die uiterste belang dat jy vir my al jou berekeninge môre wys, want daar is 'n sektorioel berekeninge in hierdie toets. Right. What is the purpose of this stock card? Wat is die doel van hierdie voorraadkaart, dames en here? Hoekom doen ek dit? I do it to determine my closing inventory at the end of the financial period, as well as my cost of sales figure for the period. So ek doen hierdie voorraadkaart, my eindvoorraadsyfer aan die einde van die periode te bereken en ook my koste van verkope syfer vir die periode te bereken. So therefore you must also make sure that you know how to derive at closing inventory, and you must know from this table how to derive at cost of sales. So jy moet van hierdie kaart af weet, hoe gaan ek by eindvoorraad uitkom en hoe gaan ek by koste van verkope uitkom. Guys, I'm telling you now, that is of the utmost importance for tomorrow's test and for the exam for that matter. And for the second semester also, for that matter, because we are going to use this in manufacturing accounts as well. Baie belangrik. Good. Now I want to talk about insurance a little bit. I haven't spoken a lot about insurance. Versekering. Now guys, in all these insurance exercises that we've done, what was the first thing that we had to determine? Wat was die eerste ding wat ons in al die versekeringsoefeninge moes bepaal het? We had to determine what was the value of closing inventory just before this event took place, the fire or the storm or the hail or the wind or whatever took place that caused our inventory to be damaged. So die heel eerste ding is die eindvoorraad wat ek moet bereken net voor hierdie gebeurtenis plaasvind, die vuur of die wind of die haal of wat my ook al getref het. So ek moet gaan bepaal wat was die voorraad voorhande gewees net toe daardie gebeur, net voordat daai gebeurtenis plaasgevind het. I have to determine the value of closing inventory just before that event took place. Nou hoe bereken ek eindvoorraad? Nou daar's twee maniere waarop ek eindvoorraad kan bereken. Die een manier is deur die voorraadkaart te gebruik en wanneer gaan ek die voorraadkaart gebruik het ons mekaar gesê? Ek gaan hom gebruik wanneer ek praat van eenhede. So as daar iewers eenhede in my vraag is, dan gebruik ek die voorraadkaart metode om by eindvoorraad uit te kom. How do I determine the value of closing inventory? There are two methods. The first method is the one that we have just spoken about. When do we use the stock card method? When I have units all the way in the question, units that's purchased and sold or whatever. Units, then I use the stock card method in order to determine the closing inventory just before the event took place. What is the alternative way? Now, if there's no units in my question, I don't have a lot of information in the question, but in the question, they give me information to work out gross profit percentages. So ek het nie eenhede in my vraag nie, maar ek het wel inligting in my vraag wat dan vir my inligting weergee van bruto winspersentasies. Want as ek 'n bruto winspersentasie het, kan ek gaan koste van verkope uitwerk. En as ek koste van verkope het, dan weet ek koste van verkope is beginvoorraad plus aankope plus aankoopsverwante kostes min eindvoorraad. Eindvoorraad is die ouetjie wat ek soek. So as ek koste van verkope se syfer het, dan kan ek by eindvoorraad uitkom. So guys, the other alternative is where I give you profit percentages, gross profit percentages. Why? Because if I have a gross profit percentage, I can work out cost of sales. If I have the figure for cost of sales, and I have the figure for opening inventory, I have the figure for purchases, I have the figure for purchase-related costs, then my closing inventory is my balancing figure. So then, that way, I can also determine the value of closing inventory. Now, where I give you profit formulas, usually what I will have to give you is either the percentage itself, or I will give you enough information of previous years so that you can work out a normal profit percentage. So ek kan of vir jou die winsformule gee, die bruto winspersentasie met ander woorde gee, of ek kan vir jou genoeg inligting gee van die vorige jare sodat jy daardie bruto winspersentasie op normale verkope kan gaan uitwerk. And then I can tell you, well, this gross profit percentage on normal sales, that has been used now for donkeys of years. So that also applies to the current financial period. So hierdie normale bruto winspersentasie wat jy uitgewerk het, dit is ook van toepassing op die huidige finansiële tydperk. So ek kan dit maar vir die huidige tydperk gaan gebruik. The only thing that you should watch out for is for deviations from the normal. So jy moet gaan pas op vir afwykings van die normaal. When will we get a deviation from the normal? When there are special sales, because with a special sale, I do not apply my normal profit formula. And therefore, I will tell you what was the profit formula applicable for the special sale, or I will give you enough information to work out the profit formula applicable on the special sale. So enige afwykings van normale verkope kan ek nie die normale winsformuletjie gaan toepas op nie. So ek sal vir jou genoeg inligting in die vraag gee, om vir jou te sê presies wat was die winsopslag op die spesiale verkope, of ek sal vir jou genoeg inligting kan gee dat jy dit kan gaan uitwerk, om dan vir my te sê wat was dan die winsopslag op die spesiale verkope. Nou hierso gebruik ek dan die handelsafdeling van die inkomstestaat as my template. So I use the trading section of my income statement as my template to work out my closing inventory. But what is the trading section of the income statement? That is sales, less cost of sales broken down into opening inventory, purchases, closing inventory, and then gross profit. So die handelsafdeling is verkope min koste van verkope is gelyk aan bruto wins, en koste van verkope breek ek in sy komponente op, begin voorraad plus aankope, aankoopsverwante kostes min eindvoorraad. Dan in hierdie template wat ek gebruik, het ek natuurlik 'n totaalkolom en daai totaalkolom, dit is wat in my inkomstestaat gelê het, nee. So in this template I have a total column, and that total column is what was lying in my income statement. But now I'm going to tear that total column apart from each other. So I will have normal sales, then I will have special sales, and if there's more than one product, please don't combine products. Each one must be done separately. So as ek meer as een produk het, moet asseblief die produkte kombineer met mekaar nie. By voorraad doen jy elke produk apart. Maak nie saak of ek die voorraadkaart gebruik en of ek hierdie metode gebruik nie. Elke voorraad item word apart hanteer. Doesn't matter, guys, whether you use a stock card method or the template method, but for each and every inventory item, you have to do the same calculation. You cannot combine inventory items. Okay. So once I have total, I have normal, and I apply my normal profit formula on my normal sales to derive at cost of sales. That is what I'm after. I want to calculate cost of sales. And then I use my special sales formula to derive at my cost of sales on the special sales. Watch out for that. Remember, if I give you invoice value, listed price value, shelf value, or advertised value, all of those values include VAT. But when I tell you that the balance of the sales account in the general ledger was whatever, you know that the sales account in the general ledger is exclusive of that. Pas op om hemelsnaam vir BTW. Faktuurpryse sluit altyd BTW in. Gelyste pryse, gemerkte pryse, rakpryse, geadverteerde pryse is altyd BTW ingesluit. Dis wet. Altyd BTW ingesluit. Maar as ek vir jou sê, die saldo van die verkooprekening in die algemene grootboek was X, dan moet jy mos weet die BTW's moes nou lankal uitgehaal. So as ek vir jou grootboekrekening saldo gee, is BTW alreeds uitgehaal. Wees wakker en lees jou vrae baie mooi. Alright, so if I can determine sales or normal sales, cost of sales and special sales. I'll add the two together and that will give me my total sales. Remember, my opening inventory figure is always my closing inventory of the previous financial period. So usually you have that figure. Purchases, purchase-related costs, I will probably give it to you, and then your balancing figure would be your closing inventory because you have the total cost of sales figure. So I can either use that or I can use this method depending on the information given in a question to derive at what? Closing inventory just before some kind of event took place. So ek kan either een van hierdie twee metodes gebruik om wat te doen, eindvoorraad te bepaal net voordat daar een of ander gebeurtenis plaasgevind het. So now I have the value of closing inventory. So what is my next step? My next step is to determine the amount of the loss that I've suffered. So my tweede stap is, wat is die verlies wat ek gelei het? Now, again, you must be very careful here. What have we determined in the first step? We have determined the closing inventory, and closing inventory is shown at cost price. Then we want to see how much of that closing inventory was not damaged in this event, fire, water, whatever it was. So obviously that items that was not damaged in the event, that was salvaged, that I need to deduct from my closing inventory because the difference between the two will be the inventory that was damaged in this specific event. Be careful that you deduct here the cost price of inventory salvage. If I give you the selling price here, you have to convert the selling price first to get the cost price because this is cost, that is cost, and my loss is always at cost. So waar ek die bedrag gaan bereken van die verlies wat ek gelei het, neem ek my eindvoorraadsyfer soos wat ek dit in stap 1 bereken het, en ek trek daarvan af die kosprys van die voorraad wat nie in hierdie gebeurtenis vernietig is nie. En dit gee dan ons vir my dan die kosprys van die items wat wel vernietig is. Nou, wees skatvoet hierso, as ek vir jou die verkoopprys gee van die voorraad wat gered is, dan moet jy eers daardie verkoopsprys omskakel in 'n kosprys in, want voorraad word getoon teen kosprys. So ek gaan die voorraad wat gered word, so kosprys moet gaan aftrek om by die werklike verlies uit te kom. Dit sal kosprys wees. Altyd, altyd, altyd. So maak 'n nota daarvan dat jy dit nie uit die oog uit verloor nie. Step number 3 is to calculate the insurance claim. Now, the first thing that I have to do is I have to test whether the averaging clause is applicable. Now, how do I test that? I get the insured amount and I compare the insured amount with the amount of closing inventory. So let's say, for example, my closing inventory was 100,000 Rand and I was insured for 80,000 Rand. So clearly I was underinsured. I only insured inventory up to a value of 80,000 Rand. I had in my store, and this got nothing to do with what was lost. It is the fact that I had in my store 100,000 Rand worth of inventory just before this event took place. Then he says, I'm going to apply averaging to you because let's assume our loss was 40,000 Rand. He says, I'm not going to pay you out the full 40,000 Rand because you were actually a bit scallum. You didn't insure yourself sufficiently, so I'm not going to pay out the full loss that you have suffered. I am going to pay you out only to the extent that you were insured. So I'm going to take your insured amount, 80,000 Rand. I'm going to divide it by the value of your closing inventory, 100,000 Rand. So 80 divided by 100 equals 80%. Of your loss amount, let's assume the loss amount is 40,000. So although you suffered a loss of 40,000, I'm going to pay you 80% of that loss, which equals 32,000 Rand. So that would be our claim that the insurer will be willing to settle. And then the insurance says, but wait a minute. He says, you know, I know that you have damaged stock here of 40,000 rand, but isn't there any chance that you can sell some of that damaged stock at some price? And you come back to him and says, well, yeah, there are some of the stock and maybe I can get 2,000 rand for that. Now, this is the only place that you work with the proceeds, i.e. the selling value, exclusive of VAT, because that is exclusive of VAT, so this must also be exclusive of VAT, that you're going to take into consideration in these calculations. So this is the only place where you work with selling prices before VAT. So he said, well, if your loss was 40,000, I'm going to pay out 80% of that. I'm going to pay out 32,000, but you can get 2,000 for this damaged good. So I'm going to deduct that from your claim as well. So at the end of the day, I'm only going to pay out 30,000. If you are a VAT vendor, I have to pay you 15% VAT as well. So at the end of the day, I'm going to pay out 34,500 rand. 15% of 30,000 equals 4,500 and gives me a total claim amount of 34,500. Right, wanneer ons die versekeringseis wil betaal, moet ons eerstens gaan toets vir Abra. Just before I go to the Afrikaans, the English guys, what would have happened if I was insured for 110,000 rand and my closing inventory was 100,000 rand? Then it means that the averaging clause is not applicable. Why not? Because I'm overinsured now. I was sufficiently insured. Closing inventory was 100,000, I was insured for 110,000. And then the insurer says, okay, in that event, I do not apply averaging, and in that event, I will pay out your full loss, not the insured amount, the amount of the loss. So in that case, they would have paid out the 40,000 rand. So that amount would have been replaced by the 40,000 rand, that amount there, sorry, 40,000. And then again, you would deduct the proceeds from damaged goods, and then you will add the VAT. Okay, die Afrikaanse ouens, die eerste stap wat ek moet doen is, ek moet kyk of die afbraakklausule van toepassing is. Wanneer is die afbraakklausule van toepassing? Wanneer 'n ou onderverseker is. Nou, wanneer is 'n ou onderverseker? As sy eindvoorraad byvoorbeeld 100,000 is en hy is net verseker vir 80,000, is hy duidelik nie genoegsaam verseker nie. So dan sê die versekeraar, luister ou goed, kom ons sê ek het 'n verlies gedaag gehad van 40,000 rand, ek gaan nie 40,000 rand uitbetaal nie, want jy was eintlik 'n bietjie skelm geweest. Jy het jouself onderverseker en daaroor gaan ek nie jou volle verlies uitbetaal nie. So hoe gaan ek bepaal hoeveel ek jou gaan uitbetaal? Ek gaan kyk wat was die bedrag wat verseker was, 80,000. My eindvoorraad soos wat ek bereken het, was 100,000. My verlies was 40,000. So dis 80 op 100 is 80% van 40,000. So ek gaan net 32,000 rand uitbetaal. Hy gaan sê, dan al die goed is BTW uitgesluit, nee? Dan gaan hy sê, maar luister, kan jy nie van daardie beskadigde voorraad dalk gaan verkoop nie? En hy sê, ja, wat? Ek kan van daai goed gaan verkoop, ek gaan 2,000 rand kry daarvoor. So nou sê hy, trek vir my die opbrengs af, BTW uitgesluit, so ons werk met BTW uitgesluit hierso, van die goed wat verkoop word. En daai gaan 2,000 rand wat ek kan kry, BTW uitgesluit, gaan trek nou af van die waarde van hierdie eis. So 80% van my 40,000 rand verlies is 32,000, ek kan 2,000 rand daarvoor kry, so met ander woorde, hy sê ek is bereid om jou 30,000 rand uit te betaal voor BTW. As ek 'n BTW ondernemer is, ek wat die eis insit, dan sê jy dan eis jy ook 15% BTW van my, wat 4,500 is, so die totale eis gaan dan 34,500 wees. Nou die finale stap is om joernaalindskrywings te gaan doen, en dames en here, hier moet jy 'n bietjie konsentreer. So the final step is to do the journal entries, and now you must concentrate for me, please. What is our accounting policy? Our accounting policy is to show inventory at the lower of cost or net realizable value. Now, if you think about this calculation here, let's assume here that our loss was 40,000 rand, like in the previous example. Our loss was 40,000 rand. Ons veronderstel hierso, ons verlies was 40,000 rand gewees, en eindvoorraad was 100,000 rand gewees. Our closing inventory we assume to be 100,000 rand. We have lost 40,000 rand of inventory. of this amount that we've lost, we can recover R2,000 when we sell that. So van hierdie bedrag wat ek verloor het, hierdie verlies, gaan ek R2,000 terugkry wanneer ek dit gaan verkoop. As ek sê ek voorraad toon in my boeke teen die laagste van kosprys of netto realiseerbare waarde, dan vra ek nou vir jou teen watter waarde gaan ek voorraad in my boeke toon? In my state. At what value am I going to show my inventory in the statement of financial position? Well, obviously, the inventory on hand that I still have is the cost price of the inventory that was not damaged at all. If that was 100 and that was 40, then that was 60,000. So, oorlopend, daardie voorraad wat glad nie in die brand vernietig is nie. Die kosprys van daai voorraad is daai 100 was en daai 40 was, dan was daai 60,000. Hulle is nie vernietig nie, so hulle moet nog in my boeke bly lê, nee, want hulle staan daar so op my rakke, R60,000 se voorraad. It's there on my shelves, R60,000 worth of inventory, so that needs to be shown in my books. For this amount of inventory that was damaged, this R40,000, what is the net realizable value of that R40,000? R2,000, the amount that I can get when I sell it in the marketplace. So die netto realiseerbare waarde van hierdie voorraad wat in die brand vernietig is R2,000, die bedrag wat ek kan kry as ek dit gaan verkoop. So met ander woorde, teen watter waarde wil ek voorraad nou in my boeke gaan toon? Teen die 60,000, wat die oorspronklike bedrag is van dit wat nie vernietig is nie, plus die R2,000 wat die netto realiseerbare waarde is van hierdie voorraad wat vernietig is. So R62,000. So guys, I want to show my inventory at the cost price of the goods that was not damaged at all, which was 60,000, plus the net realizable value of the stuff that was damaged, which was the 2,000. So I want to show my inventory in my books at 62,000 rand. At what value is my inventory currently in my books? At that value of 100,000 rand, the initial closing balance of my inventory. So I'm going to write off then 38,000 rand. 100,000 less the amount I want to see there of 62,000 equals 38,000 rand. So ek gaan vir my voorraad afskryf 38,000 rand, die oorspronklike 100,000 voorraad wat daar gelê het, minus die waarde van my voorraad wat ek in my boeke wil toon, 62,000, wat dan 38,000 rand is. So, my first entry is going to be debit and expense account inventory loss of 38,000 rand, and I'm going to credit my inventory account in the statement of financial position with 38,000 rand. So my eerste inskrywing voorraadverlies, uitgawe rekening met 38,000 rand, en gaan my voorraadrekening se saldo in die staat van wat die staat van finansiële posisie inskrywing is, krediteer met 38,000 rand, en dan gaan my voorraad getoon word teen die 62,000 rand wat ek daar wil hê. So once I've passed this entry, then my inventory will be shown at the 62,000 rand that I want in my books. The next step is I have introduced a claim against the insurer. So whatever the amount is that I've worked out for my claim here, that is the amount that the insurer owes me. So die versekeraar skuld aan my hierdie bedrag wat ek nou eis van hom. So I'm going to debit the insurer with that total amount. The amount of the VAT, so that 50% that I added to the claim, daardie 15% wat ek by die eisbedrag getel het, that I'm going to take to my VAT output account. Dit gaan ek na my BTW uitsetrekening toe neem. En die verskil tussen dit wat die versekeraar my skuld en dan die BTW, dan ek moes terug by daardie bedrag. So the difference between the amount that the insurer owes me less the VAT brings me back to that original amount of the claim. So although I've worked out that my loss was 38,000 rand, then that is not actually the truth, because I'm going to recover a portion of that loss from the insurer. So therefore, I'm going to credit that loss there with my amount, the amount that actually that I can put into my pocket, that amount there. Daardie bedrag daarso, die bedrag van die eis voor die BTW, dit gaan ek dan afspeel teen daai voorraadverlies. Sien jy, daar's 'n credit. You see there's a credit, there was a debit. So effectively, I'm going to reduce that loss now. With this amount, I'm going to recover from the insurer. So ek maak my verlies minder met die bedrag wat ek gaan verhaal van die versekeraar. And then when the insurer is going to pay me, I'm going to debit bank and I'm going to clean out his account with the amount he's going to pay. So wanneer die versekeraar my betaal, debiteer ek sy rekening en ek krediteer die versekeraar se rekening. Any questions? Enige vrae?
Yes, ma'am. But I just want to make sure with the proceeds from damaged goods sold, that amount, is it VAT exclusive? I just want to double check.
If I tell you the receipt or a receipt was issued or the amount received, that means it includes VAT. So why? Because I receive a total VAT inclusive amount. Okay. But if I tell you that the sales price is VAT exclusive is X, then obviously it's exclusive. If I tell you that the sales value of these goods is Y, then that will also include VAT, and you have to exclude the VAT.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
Okay. Any other questions?
Ma'am.
Okay, Melfarko?
Oh, ma'am, I know you said with the total claim is 34,500. Now,
Yes.
if we look at the insurer, are we going to debit the insurer with 34,500?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
I just want to make sure. Thank you, ma'am.
Right. The other question? Nicola?
Ek wil net weet die versekeraar rekening, word hy reageer hy soos 'n debiteerde rekening waar ons hom gaan debiet waar hy meer word en as hulle nou ons betaal dan creditors hom.
Ja, daardie versekeraar is 'n ander debiteur, so hy gaan in my handels en ander debiteure nota dan ook getoon word as 'n ander debiteur, met ander woorde onderhandelsdebiteure. Guys, it's a good question that you asked. She says that insurer, before he's actually going to pay us, that account there, where are we going to show that? That will become part of trade and other receivables. It will be shown as an other receivable in the trade and receivable note. So that will be in that note, this amount will appear before settlement takes place.
Baie dankie.
More questions?
Ma'am, I have another question. In the activity Tanta, I just want to make sure the settlement discount was they paid the entity paid cash. I just want to ask, why was the settlement discount also deducted from the original value of the purchase amount if they paid cash?
Well, that's a good question, and that's actually something that I must go and make that more clear in that question. Guys, because the golden rule is cash discounts is already deducted from inventory price or from invoice prices. So kontantkortings word gewoonlik direk afgetrek van kontant pryse, nee, as daar kontantbetalings plaasvind. So in that question, they have deducted the settlement discount. He's talking about Tanta. They have deducted the settlement discount from that cash amount. But that is actually, I must go and correct that question and to make sure that I specifically tell you to do so. Because normally, when there's a cash payment, the cash payment that is made after the discount has already been deducted. So as daar kontantkorting is, dan behoort die korting alreeds afgetrek. Of dit daar kontantkorting is, dan gaan die faktuurbedrag al wees nadat die kontantkorting alreeds afgetrek is. So ek moet net in Tanta gaan kyk, daar gaan trek hulle die vereffeningskorting af van die kontantbedrag, wat ek moet eintlik daai vereffeningskorting net verander na kontantkorting toe en die bedrag voor kontantkorting ook vir julle gee. So,
Ma'am,
a good question.
Sorry. Okay, with Tanta, there's already trade discount. You already received trade discount, but there's also settlement discount. Both the trade discount and the settlement discount was subtracted.
Oh, that's right. The trade discount must be subtracted. And the settlement discount there, I'm just going to change the wording. And I tell them that they paid the day thereafter and they made use of the settlement discount. Then there's no confusion. Okay.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. And
Okay.
then I have another question as well. Do you take the trade discount into account with purchases returns? Because in Benedict's,
Yeah.
you only you only took the trade discount into account after the purchase return.
Okay, but you must read the question very carefully. It all depends on the wording in the question. If I tell you based on the original invoice amount, X whatever was returned, then the original invoice amount would have been after trade discount already, and then the trade discount has been deducted. The question can also tell you that the normal amount or the normal invoice amount was X, and then you have to deduct the trade discount still from that amount because the normal amount does not include the trade discount. So you must be very careful. This is all about the wording of that question and what this return or the amount of the return relate to. It differs from question to question, but it's very clear if you read your question very carefully whether you still have to deduct the trade discount again or whether it has already been deducted. So as I vra, dames en here, by party plekke as ek goed teruggee, dan moet ek die handelskorting weer 'n keer gaan aftrek en by party plekke het ek dit nie weer afgetrek nie. Nou hoekom nie? En my antwoord is jy moet mooi gaan kyk na die bewoording van daai vraag. Partykeer praat hulle van normale faktuurpryse sou of 'n normale kredietnota sou soveel gewees het en dan weet jy dan is die handelskorting nog nie afgetrek nie en dan moet jy dit gaan aftrek. Of as ek vir jou sê die kredietnota is uitgereik gebaseer op oorspronklike faktuurpryse voorkortings, dan weet jy dan moet die handelskorting nog afgetrek word. So hierdie ding is nie, daar's nie 'n hard and fast rule vir hierdie nie. Jy moet gaan kyk na wat is die bewoording in die vraag en dan moet jy hom daarvolgens hanteer.
Okay, ma'am, I understand that. In the question, there was also purchase returns, but purchase returns was they calculated it with at the original invoice price and not after the trade discount. I just want to know why. I'm not sure why.
Just read that question very carefully. Go and read that carefully. If you still don't know, then send me a WhatsApp and then I'll read it for you. Okay.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
Okay.
Sorry, ma'am.
Ja?
Ek net weet mevrou moes sê as jy vereffeningskorting het, moet jy aan 2 beentjies deel en in een deel gaan jy vereffeningskorting wees, een sonder vereffeningskorting. En dan moet jy mens nou die voorraad sonder die vereffeningskorting, dan kom jy nou as die 97%. Dan moet jy nou vat met jou voorraadkaart toe. Maar kan jy net die 100 vat om daar soos die boose deel van die voorraadkaart sit minus die vereffeningskorting?
Ja. Jy kan dit so doen 100%. Okay.
Ma'am.
Okay. I don't know who's the lady. Give the lady the chance, yes?
Sorry, ma'am, I know you said this before, but I just wanted to ask, what is the amount that we should put in the insurer? I'm sorry that you have to.
Claim. If you go to this one here, it will be this amount here, the total amount of the claim. That will go to the insurer. That's the amount that he owes us. That VAT account, if you're going to post the journal, the VAT will be posted to the VAT output account, and that amount there will be a credit against the inventory loss.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
Okay.
Hello, ma'am.
Yep.
Ma'am, I just want to ask, like, you could maybe help me. I was just thinking in the WAHA activity, we did it with debtors though, where there was like a credit period where we were prepared, like we were expecting them to pay within like 10 days where they would get 2%, but they paid in 5 days, get 5%. If we did that like the other way around, the inverse, where we prepared to pay, were prepared for them to pay the 5%, but they didn't, and they only got the 2%. What would happen with the allowance for settlement discount then?
Exactly the same thing. Somebody asked me this morning on a WhatsApp as well. Maybe I must just find that WhatsApp and just put it on the group. Exactly the same thing will happen. Remember, when the purchase or the sales transaction, depending whether it's purchases or sales, when that transaction takes place, that first transaction, I record the allowance for settlement discount based on my expectation, not on the actual, on my expectation. That is very important, and that was a big mistake that about 80% of you have made in test 2. So when I'm going to record something at that first sales transaction or the purchase transaction, I'm going to create an allowance account at the expected allowance that I'm going to utilize. Now let's assume that we have expected to utilize a 5% discount. Now payment takes place, and eventually when I paid, I could only utilize a 2% settlement discount. Then I'm still going to take that allowance out of my books because I have to get rid of it. Now, what did we take to inventory when we did the purchase transaction? Let's assume that was 5% the initial allowance. So that means that we took 95% of the VAT exclusive invoice amount to the inventory account. Now we've settled, and now we could only get 2% settlement discount. So what does it mean? After we've taken out the 5% in our books, we have to adjust our inventory with that additional 3%, which I could not have utilized. So actually, if I knew from the start of point, at what value would I have recorded inventory? At 98% of the VAT exclusive invoice amount. So now I must make sure at the end of the day, after payment took place, and I could only utilize 2%, that my inventory after my adjustment entry will equal 98% of the original invoice amount. And then you're going to then, well, if it's a purchase transaction, it's VAT output, and VAT output is now only going to be paid on the actual discount received, which is the 2%. I'll just see whether I can find that thing. I will put it for you on the group that you can see exactly. I took out a whole example and I put down all the debits and credit entries so that you can see exactly how that looks. Okay.
Thank you, ma'am.
Ma'am?
Yes?
I'm sorry, I just want to make sure if a company or if we or whatever offers allowance for settlement discount, let's say it's 5%, but we pay in cash, we do not get that 5%, correct?
No, that is only on credit sales. So settlement discount is on credit sales. There is something like we call a cash discount if we pay cash over the counter, but then you immediately receive that discount, and the invoice that they're going to give to you is also going to be at the amount after the cash discount has been deducted. That's why I said I have to go and adjust Tanta, because it is the way that they treat that settlement discount for cash payment made at the same stage that I've purchased that thing. That is not 100% correct. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Guys, but Tanta is a very good exercise. Over and above for that one little glitch, it's an excellent exercise. So you can go and have a look at Tanta with a lot of pleasure in your heart.
Ma'am?
Yes.
When it comes to stock cards, what is the main difference between perpetual and periodic systems?
Okay. When I talk about the periodic one, the periodic one is going to be, like I've said, in date order. I'm going to have purchases, sales as we go along. If I work weighted average cost, each time I'm going to make a purchase transaction, the weighted average cost is going to change, and I'm going to make a sales transaction based on the latest weighted average cost. So obviously you're going to go on date order right through, and there's going to be a change as you go along. And even with first in, first out, you have to do it in date order because your batches are going to look different, out of which you're going to make your sales for, as you go along. Now that is perpetual. With a periodic one, I'm going to look in total. I'm going to say, well, I've purchased 5,000 items, and in total for the year, that 5,000 items that I've purchased right through the year was 100,000 Rand. And then I'm going to say, well, I've sold 80 items, so I've got left 20 items, and I'm going to work out then, when I work with weighted average, I'm going to take the 100,000 divided by the number bought during the year, I get a weighted average cost, and I'm going to apply that cost to the number of items on hand at the end of the year. I'm also going to apply that cost to the total number of units sold during the year. So obviously totally different from where I've used the perpetual system, where I work out step by step by step by step, each time a new price and then a new price and a new price. And the same thing with first in, first out is when I work periodic, I'm going to say, well, I had 5 items at that price. I purchased right through the year 100 items at that price. I had available to sell so many items at that price. I have sold so many items. I have 20 items left. Okay, now let's just check. Out of the last batch that I purchased, the last purchase price, in that batch, that was the cost, and I'm going to apply that cost. So you're not going to do them one by one by one by one. You're going to do it total for the year available to sell, total units sold, and then you're going to apply one price as you go along. So have a look in your inventory slides, that first slides that you've done on inventory. I've done those calculations. Just go back there and make sure that you know how to do that. Okay.
Thank you, ma'am.
Any other questions?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Okay. Within the trade and other credit, other payables, we subtract the allowance for settlement discount creditors from the trade creditors to get the net creditors value in the trade and other payables. Does it also account for trade and other receivables? Do you subtract the trade and sorry, ma'am, I didn't hear you.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
All right, guys, then just to talk a little bit about disclosure, openbaarmaking that you're going to get tomorrow, for sure, you just don't know what you're going to disclose. If I ask you inventory, to disclose inventory, you should disclose the accounting policy note. You must know that note by heart. Inventory is shown at the low of cost and net realizable value. Net realizable value is the expected selling price of an item after compulsory selling costs have been deducted. The entity uses the first in, first out or whatever method. So jy moet nommer 1 die rekenkundige beleidsaantekening kan doen, jy moet hom woord vir woord reg kan sê. Voorraad word getoon teen die laagste van kosprys op netto realiseerbare waarde. Netto realiseerbare waarde is die verwagte verkoopsopbrengs op die item na die verpligte verkoopsonkoste daarvan afgetrek is. Die onderneming gebruik die eerste en eerste uitmetode van voorraadwaardasie. That is my accounting policy note, my rekenkundige beleidsaantekening. My inventory note, my voorraadnota, gaan per class, so per class item. At this stage, you will only have 2 classes, which will be trading inventory and consumer good. Wat is verbruikersvoorraad? Consumer goods. So consumer goods are things that I use up, like stationery, packaging material, fuel, things like that. If I still have at the end of the year an inventory left of those items, I also have to show that as part of my inventory. So op hierdie stadium per klas gaan jy net handelsvoorraad en verbruiksvoorraad kry. Verbruiksvoorraad is goed so skryfhoeftes, verpakkingsmateriaal, brandstof, al daai tipe goed wat ek op jaareinde nog voorhande het en nog nie gebruik is nie. Then very important, and make a big note, if you had the NRV adjustment during the year, net realizable value adjustment during the year, you have to mention the fact in your inventory note, and this will be by ways of a sentence under your figure work. To mention the fact that there was an NRV adjustment, you have to mention the reason why, and you have to mention the amount of the NRV adjustment. So as jy 'n netto realiseerbare waarde afskrywing gehad het gedurende die jaar, moet jy die feit noem, en hierdie is in 'n paragraaf onder jou syfertjies. Jy moet die feit noem dat daar NRV afskrywing was, jy moet die rede daarvoor gee en jy moet die bedrag daarvoor gee. Then guys, it's very important that you distinguish between these two or three words. When I talk about disclose something in the financial statements, then it means you have to show everywhere where this thing pops up. So if I ask you to disclose, for instance, inventory in the statement of financial position, you have to start with the face of the statement of financial position. So you see ABC Limited financial position as of 31st December 2020, assets, current assets, inventory, the note number, and the total. And then you will have notes to the name of the entity, notes to the financial statements for the year ended 31st December 2020. First note, accounting policy note, and you're going to spin your accounting policy note. Second note, my inventory note, and there you're going to do all these things with a total of your total inventory that needs to correspond back to your face of your statement of financial position. Please note that if there was an NRV adjustment that you made during the year, that obviously the amount that you're going to disclose your trading inventory at will be after the NRV adjustment has already been deducted. That is really important. Okay, so as ek vir jou die woordjie openbaar voorraad in die finansiële state van die maatskappy vra, dan begin jy. ABC beperk. Staat van finansiële posisie. Dit beteken ek moet hom oral waar hy geophop moet ek hom gaan wys. Staat van finansiële posisie soos op 31 Desember 2020. Ek gaan sê bates, bedryfsbates, voorraad, 'n nommer vir voorraad se voorraad se aantekening en ek gaan 'n totaalbedrag hê. Dan gaan ek sê die naam van die maatskappy ABC beperk aantekeninge tot die finansiële state vir die jaar geëindig 31 Desember 2020. Eerste aantekening, my rekenkundige beleidsaantekening en ek gaan hom skryf. My tweede aantekening gaan my voorraadnota wees. Daar gaan ek sê handelsvoorraad, verbruiksvoorraad met 'n totaal en daai as ek 'n NRW afskrywing gedoen het, daai totale wat ek gaan wys in my nota, moet die totale wees nadat die NRW afskrywing alreeds daarteen afgetrek is. En dan gaan ek hierdie sinnetjie skryf. So openbaarmaking beteken die gesig van die staat van finansiële posisie sowel as alle notas wat daarvan toepassing is. When I ask or when I tell you prepare the inventory note or show the inventory note or notes to the financial statements, well, then you have to do the accounting policy note and the inventory note only, and you're not going to do the face of the statement of financial position. So as die woorde is, toon die voorraadnotas of berei die voorraadnotas voor tot die staat van finansiële posisie, dan doen jy net die rekenkundige beleidsaantekening en die voorraadnota aantekening. If I tell you to ignore the accounting policy note, then you do not write the accounting policy note. So ek vir jou sê, jy kan maar die rekenkundige beleidsaantekening ignoreer, dan skryf jy hom natuurlik nie, want jy mors net jou tyd, jy gaan die punte daarvoor kry nie. Okay, so these are very important words. Make sure disclose means everywhere. The face of the statement of financial position plus all the notes. So openbaarmaking beteken alles, die gesig van die staat van finansiële posisie plus alle notas. Toon of berei die aantekening voor, prepare or show the note, that is only about the notes itself. And then I've thought about this slogan, don't despair, we get you there. So, ek kan dit nou rarig nie in Afrikaans sê nie, so julle moet nou maar die Brits hierso vat. Don't despair, we will get you there. Any other questions, guys?
Mevrou, ek het 'n vraag. Dit gaan oor die verbruikersvoorraad. Sê nou maar, ek dink mevrou het die voorbeeld gebruik van brandstof ergens, dat die prys van brandstof styg of daal. Wanneer verander jy dan nou jou verbruikersvoorraad se waarde?
Ons sê dit is 'n baie goeie vraag wat hy vra. Ladies and gentlemen, the question is, let's say that we have diesel, we have our own fuel tanks and we have diesel in the tank. And we have now the prices are going up and down, and at year end we've passed the NRV adjustment on our diesel on hand. So pryse gaan op en af en op jaareinde sit ons 'n netto realiseerbare waarde afskrywing op ons dieselvoorraad deur. And then just after year end, suddenly the price increases again. So ewe skielik na jaareinde gaan die prys weer op. Then you do not do anything. Jy doen dan verder net niks nie. So dit maak nie saak as daardie NRW afskrywing wat jy gemaak het op jaareinde na jaareinde omswaai, dan ignoreer jy dit net. So if this NRW adjustment that you've passed at year end is actually switching around in the new year, i.e. the value of that inventory item suddenly increases, you do not do anything with that at all. You will just carry on normally and use the value of the stock in your books as the value of the inventory that you've consumed. So that will become part of your expense. So jy doen niks verder nie as jy dan van daardie diesel gaan gebruik gedurende die nuwe finansiële tydperk, dan gebruik jy dit nog eers op teen die ou waarde waarteen dit in jou boeke gelê het, met ander woorde die waarde nadat die NRWA reeds afgeskryf het. En dan van die nuwe aankope af gaan natuurlik teen die nuwe pryse geskied. OK.
Dankie mevrou.
Any other questions, guys? Enige vrae? Asseblief, jy weet, ek het vandag vir 'n student gesê, Jan, jy vra.
Ja, mevrou, ek het nog gevra. Ek wil net seker maak vir ietsie, maar mevrou kan eers praat.
Nee, spin gou.
Okay. Mevrou het ons gesê vooruit ontvangde inkomste en opgelope uitgawes is altyd BTW uitgesluit, nee. Dis al wat ek wil weet.
Ja, vooruitbetaalde uitgawes sal nooit wet in nie. Hoekom? Want kontantvloei het reeds plaasgevind. So ek het klaar die wet hanteer. Opgelope uitgawes sal wet in, want dis die bedrag wat ek skuld. So dit sal wet in. So inkomste vooruit ontvang en vooruitbetaalde uitgawes het kontantvloei plaasgevind, so daar's geen BTW nie. Maar opgelope inkomste en opgelope uitgawes, dit sal wel BTW in. Okay.
Baie dankie.
Okay. For the English guys, let me just say that again. Prepaid expenses and income received in advance means that cash flow has already taken place, so I've already handled the VAT. So it's only accrued expenses and accrued income that is going to include VAT if it is a VAT-able item. Obviously, if it's interest payable, there's no VAT on interest, so there's no VAT. Alright, julle ouens, ek hou vir julle styftime vas vir môre. Asseblief moenie swat tot 3 uur vanoggend en dan dink jy gaan vir môreoggend 8 uur vars genoeg wees om te kan skryf nie. So have a good night's rest. Please don't swat right through the night because then you're going to be tired by the time that you're going to write. So please, 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 I'm thinking of you. I'm holding my thumbs for you. Good luck with tomorrow's test. I hope we're going to see, all of us, a huge improvement to the first 2 tests. Cheers.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am. Bye-bye.
Thank you for the help today, ma'am.
Bye, ma'am.
Mevrou?
Ja?
Ekskuus, so mevrou asseblief net kortliks vir my in Engels specific identification kan verduidelik. Ek is nie seker ek verstaan dit nie. Ek verstaan die averaging en so aan, maar ek is nie seker ek verstaan die specific identification nie.
Specific identification gaan presies daar soos wat die naam sê. Hy sê ek is byvoorbeeld 'n motorhandelaar, nê. Nee. En op my vloer staan daar 4 karre. So ek weet ek het vir daai kar het ek R10,000 betaal, vir daai kar het ek R15,000 betaal en vir daai kar het ek R16,000 betaal. So wanneer ek nou die waarde van eindvoorraad moet bereken, dan weet ek dit is 15,000 plus 16,000 plus 14,000 of wat ook al die bedrag was. So ek kan presies vir jou sê per produk wat het daardie item gekos. En dit, as ek nou al daardie items vat met hulle werklike pryse en ek tel al daai goed bymekaar, dan is ek by die werklike waarde van my eindvoorraad item. So ek kan slegs spesifieke identifikasie gebruik as ek 'n baie klein hoeveelheid items op my vloer het, sodat ek kan trek hoeveel is daardie items werd.
Okay, so dan behandel mense as mens iets verkoop of iets, dan behandel mense net op 'n one-on-one basis.
Op 'n one-on-one basis, heeltemal reg. So ek sê nou môre verkoop ek daai Ferrari, hy het R1 miljoen gekos. Wat was die cost of sales? R1 miljoen. En nou verkoop ek daardie Lamborghini, hy het R1.5 miljoen gekos. Wat is die cost of sales? R1.5 miljoen. Okay.
Okay, baie dankie.
Dis hier.